Hi, everyone. In a wild turn of events, we record an April Fool's Day episode, and my past self or Audacity or something played an April Fool's Day early prank on me, and we lost my audio for part 1. So please enjoy before our episode proper begins with part 2. This highlight reel of very fun discussion from Robin and our guest, Andrea, who is guesting as your resident neighborhood vampire. I did go ahead and move our factions to the beginning of part 2, so you will have a fun highlight reel, and then the factions, and then the episode will begin. Thank you for listening.
So our first topic is absent parents. Yes, they don't have any voiced lines. So, like, the caterpillar, he hatches, and his first thought is about things he doesn't know, but he knows he needs to solve. And he's, like, totally alone. But the sun and the moon are these weird, like, present guardian-ish figures that objectively are not the caterpillar's parents. So, yeah, wait, does the caterpillar wake up at night?
Waking up at night can be more comfortable for some people. It really depends. I suppose for humans, or are caterpillars more like humans? I suppose the day would be more comfortable.
This is part of why this is our first topic, our less severe topic, because the caterpillar doesn't seem as stressed by the absence of his parents as we might be in a similar situation. And yeah, I think that's definitely a more minor concern. There's the implication that they're not there, but it's fine.
So one of the things that it made me think of were those the studies they did not too long ago about, or I'm not sure when it was, easy to lose track of time. But they did this study, I think it was with monkeys, where the monkeys were, they could get milk or food or whatever, and it wasn't from a living, monkey mother. There was one that was made out of wire and was uncomfortable, and one that was soft and more comfortable. And it's possible even that the food they could get from the wire mom was better food. Don't quote me on that, I'm not sure. But basically the monkeys would always prefer the more comfortable, soft monkey food giver as opposed to the wire one. So this feeling of needing that comfort, the physical touch, they talk about how infants need, well, at least mammal infants, so a little different from a caterpillar, I suppose, but they need the physical touch. So this idea that yes, the caterpillar is getting food, but not getting emotionally fed. There are different types of hunger, I guess.
It gets, well, with the study, I'm going to definitely link to the study in the show notes because I want people to have the context, and we're not here to discuss the monkey study. But there were 2 combinations of conditions. Half the monkeys were in a situation where the wire mother had food and the cloth did not. And in the other, the cloth mother had food while the wire mother did not. And in both conditions, they stayed with the cloth mother. If they had to go, I looked it up. So I will link. I already knew what study you were talking about, so I looked it up. But yeah, apparently when only the wire mother had food, they came to the wire mother to feed and immediately returned to the cloth mother. So, yeah, so that's definitely more of a mammal thing, and caterpillars are not mammals. They are arthropods. In fact, they're insects. Lepidoptera, just in case anyone cares. But Sorry, I was so busy looking at that study that I lost the train of where we were on this.
Another similar, when we talk about, I mentioned something about different types of hunger. Another thing it reminded me of was sort of the well-off kid. Like they want for nothing except for their parents' love. It's kind of a stereotype. But that could potentially, I mean, I'm extrapolating pretty far on this, but that idea of like, yes, I have food and I'm safe, but there's none of that support system. And that can be kind of an interesting conflict, I guess.
Hello, everyone. Since this is either a highlight, a standalone book, or the first episode in a series, I'm jumping in to remind you what the rules are for this podcast. First rule is no real people stories. That means that any details from our own lives are merely anecdotal. We do not read books about real people, and we are not reading historical fiction. The second rule is that we are basing our analyses off of how the author treats characters and what they put them through. We are not judging the accuracy of the trauma, the accuracy of any actual conditions that may be portrayed, nor the authenticity of a character's reaction to that trauma or that particular condition. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. The hosts are not trained professionals, and their opinions come solely from personal experience. In this episode, we discuss fictional depictions of trauma and violence that may not be suitable for all audiences. Please take care of yourselves. Specific content warnings for each episode can be found in the show notes. Events in the media are discussed in approximate order of escalation. This episode contains spoilers.
Today on Books That Burn, we are talking about The Very Hungry Caterpillar with our guest Andrea. Stick with us as we talk about what happens growing up in a world where everything is hard to manage and just a little bit too big and you have no parents and only food. Hi, I'm Nicole.
And I'm Robin, and today on Books That Burn, we have a guest. Would you please introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Andrea. Very excited to be here. I've been waiting just so many years. More years than I can even count. Have a lot of projects going on, though I tend to be more active at night. I'm very excited to discuss this very important piece of literature.
And we're really happy to have you. First, I'm going to get into our factions. We have the caterpillar, the moon, and the sun. A little bit of a short faction list this week. For our second topic, we have food insecurity. And we're saying insecurity and not scarcity because the caterpillar does end up having access to food. We just want to talk about the beginning part of the book where he's not sure what's going to happen with that.
Yeah. Plus, the book actually gives us pretty good contextual evidence for him having access to a lot of food that he just is not going after or doesn't eat. So yeah, this is not a scarcity problem.
But there definitely is some uncertainty. Also, I noticed that the amount of food that he ate, I don't know if this corresponds to the amount of food available or not, but the amount that he ate increased every day, which kind of implies that he was going from an area that had a little bit but not a ton of food to a location that had a great deal more. Because we are not caterpillars, the specific list of food that he obtains on the Saturday seems to correspond to a human picnic, but that goes a little bit outside the bounds of what's exactly in the text.
Yeah, that's a little bit of conjecture, but it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I can see where that kind of fits in.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of interesting to watch through the shape of the story too, as the caterpillar is eating more as the days go on. Which, weirdly enough, illustratively, is not implied to be because he is growing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, not until the very last day.
Yeah.
That was kind of odd.
He's sort of, he's eating more and more, and it's not, or it's doing the same amount. It is almost like the kind of an addiction story, and I think that can come from as a response to food insecurity. That feeling of like, when I have food, I have to eat all of it.
Right.
Because I don't know when I'm going to get it again. And that can become kind of an addiction cycle.
And as we're talking about, like, the author making these choices, it's not just the character. Like, the author is the one deciding what he's going to go through. The day with the strawberries confused me because it seemed like this weird narrative moment where the caterpillar is eating more every day, but then on the Thursday with the strawberries, yes, the number went up, but they're smaller than plums. They're significantly smaller than pears.
Yeah.
And so you have like this weird curve where, numerically he ate more food potentially. I guess maybe that's the difference between it saying that he ate or that he ate through. And so the caterpillar, the amount of fruits he goes through is more important than how big the actual fruit is. I guess there's kind of that implication, but it just seemed like an odd choice from the author there.
Okay.
I think you also have to consider the audience and the reading level that this is intended for.
Yeah.
So I feel like part of that is just, if you're thinking about keeping your audience engaged, something like counting and matching the number of items, not necessarily thinking about how much volumeage of food it actually is, and matching those to a day is more likely to keep hooked the audience that this is intended for. So it could totally just be a narrative thing, but as a character choice, it does feel weird. Also, the inclusion of oranges feels weird to me for a related but different reason. Because they have that very thick, I almost called it a rind. What is it called
peel?
on an orange? The peel?
Yeah.
Yeah, that.
Would you say they're less appealing?
I would, in fact.
Yes.
Especially because that had to have taken a lot of energy that this caterpillar does not have at this point in time to kind of eat through that peel.
Yeah, well,
something like a strawberry is much easier to get into and,
Well, okay, also, as we were talking about this, I realized something. So we start with one apple. An apple, that's a decent source of fiber. It's a solid kind of, hefty fruit. We go to pears, a little bit less nutritionally dense. We get to plums, higher water content. Again, strawberries, less nutrition. Oranges are basically just orange juice in nature's Capri Sun pouch. So basically we're moving from one very potentially more nutrient dense, especially to a caterpillar who eats fiber. Like what is a leaf but straight fiber. Up to these oranges that are mostly liquid. And then of course we get to Saturday with just full on junk food. That's your classic food desert situation where you can eat a lot of calories but not a lot of nutrients. And that can be an issue with health and happiness.
And we'll talk about that a little bit more in like our next topic, but absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't want to get too
that is a thing.
Distracted, but
I do want to jump off of what you just said at something that just occurred to me. With the concept of that nutrient density kind of going down as the days progress, but the number of items that the caterpillar is eating are going up. And that's almost a 1-to-1 conceptually. Like you take one step down nutritionally, you add one thing that he's eating. And at that point he's just eating to feel like he has eaten, it seems like. because he's not getting those nutrients. And so he has to eat another item because he didn't get what he needed from the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, like, that isn't to say that for humans this would be a bad progression of food
caterpillars
necessarily.
Are tiny and they need
yeah, well, they need Andrea was right about fiber being like a pretty big deal for caterpillars, especially. I didn't actually become an entomologist like I thought maybe I would when I was in middle school, so I can't speak quite as much on this. But yeah, you know, oranges, you said they're the natural Capri Sun. They're pretty liquid. So like unless he's tracing his way through like the fiber dense shells around each bit of the liquid, it's definitely not getting as much fiber as if he'd stuck to apples. Mm-hmm. But, you know, a little bit more nutritional variety across the week than if he just had apples.
Right. Well, and yeah, of course, you know, different species, you know, some people can thrive on a liquid diet, but others need something a little bit more solid. And nothing wrong with Capri Sun, you know. What's a human but a walking Capri Sun pouch? Am I right?
Exactly. On to illness. So one of almost the very last thing that happens in the book is that the caterpillar feels very sick. Now we're saying illness, it's that he ate a lot of weird things. I believe Andrea was starting to talk about that in our previous section. I had to pause them because this is the place for it.
Yeah, so
yes, I'm here.
Oh no, Andrea, are you there?
Okay.
Oh.
Did you want to talk a little bit about illness? Because you had started to speak on it slightly in the food insecurity topic, but this is the place for it.
Right. That feeling of eating too much or eating perhaps past the point of comfort because you're not sure when you'll have it again. I remember too, reading a short story by David Sedaris where he talks about having to give away some of his Halloween candy. His mom was trying to make him do this, and in response to that, he just started eating all of it because he was so...
Oh, no.
I don't know, so stressed and so freaked out about having to give away any of his candy. So he's even eating chocolate that he knew he was allergic to. You know, and his mom walks in and his mouth full of chocolate. He's already got a stomachache and a migraine, but he's just so stressed about his candy. That's kind of what this reminded me of, that feeling of like, oh, this might be my last meal for who knows how long, so I have to eat so much.
Also, can we go back, just reference our first topic?
Sure.
This caterpillar has no... So eventually he does eat a leaf and kind of recover from the sickness that he had from eating a whole lot of preservatives and a whole lot of sugar. But he has nobody to tell him, hey, these things are not actually going to be okay for you.
Yeah. Like, I'm glad that he came up with the solution of eating a leaf. The book, I mean, talking about, like, the author choosing what to inflict on the caterpillar, I don't know, it felt like this weird judgment. Like, to me, when I read it, it felt a little bit like the book was saying, yes, should have been eating leaves all along instead of all the stuff, especially the Saturday stuff. Like, the rest of the week probably was fine, but there's definitely this implication of, like, oh, he ate a nice green leaf. Or it was either a single green leaf or a nice green leaf. It was some language like that. Give me one moment. A nice green leaf. And then felt much better.
Yeah. Yeah, people are always telling me to eat leaves, especially spinach. Because I'm always anemic, like I have a really low iron content. Just not enough blood in my blood, I guess. You know, a huge issue. I'm sure you other humans understand that. But
oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's
humans.
A chronic problem for us.
Yeah, it's a little judgmental. And I guess, you're looking at it's a kid's book. And kids books,
Right.
they love to have morals. A big, like, this is what you should be doing. It's saying, like, don't eat candy, eat a leaf, and then you'll feel better. Which, like, maybe is true, but it's also assuming that you have access to leaves, which not everyone does.
Also, ironically, if human children followed the advice of eating a nice green leaf, presumably from like a garden or outside or something, it might not work out quite as well for them as it did for this caterpillar.
Oh, yeah.
So all in all, it's got like this weird judgy tone, and then the humans who presumably would be the ones reading this book, it's possible some non-humans might read it, I guess, but human children who presumably would read this book and would take the lesson of, the caterpillar felt sick eating all this food that you like, but then he felt better after a leaf. It has the implication of, if you eat all of this, you'll feel bad, and so you should eat a leaf. But I don't know, it's judgy without quite being able to give good advice about it, assuming a human audience.
I always forget, like, which plants humans can eat and which they can't. It's hard to keep track.
To be fair, there is a long list of plants who have evolved poison to keep from being eaten, and we use those plants to flavor other things.
Yeah.
So, it's a legitimately
hot
difficult
peppers
thing to
really
keep track
thought they
of.
were doing something, and then humans were like,
They did. And so did coffee.
Humans
So
just
did
love
coffee and
poison. What can I say?
I mean, it's...
We do. We invented alcohol to have more poison as a treat. But anyways,
I mean, it keeps me from eating caffeine.
We could have a whole discussion on just that, I think.
Yeah.
There's another book we can save that for. But
definitely.
Yeah, it's and also I do want to point out, as kind of or at least the last point I have with this, is that this caterpillar is less than a week old. This is the first time in their life that they have gotten sick. And presumably, because they turn into a butterfly before the end of the book, this is the only time they will ever experience food-based sickness. That's a lot.
Right. When your life is short, every experience is so much bigger. That's why when you're a teenager,
well, and especially when you're
everything is the worst and the best.
It's literally the worst.
It is the worst and the best that you've ever felt, because you've only been alive for 15 years. But when you've been alive for 31 years, you have more context.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. And, I know enough about butterflies to know that, depending on which kind of butterfly he is, but generally butterflies do eat. They just will never eat this much, and they won't eat these kinds of things again. That was the last leaf.
They're not going to have a varied diet the way this caterpillar is my point.
Yeah, but across all the species of butterflies, there are a lot of butterflies drink nectar, but there actually are there's at least one kind of butterfly that drinks blood.
So, it's not always human food that is relatable to our...
Oh, that's interesting.
Absolutely.
I really did, I really have felt the whole time that I can really identify with this character. That transformation from one sort of state of being to another, a big change in the diet, a change in how you look, that's big.
It's a lot.
Yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's enough that we briefly considered having body horror be one of the topics we discussed, and I'm happy with the 3 that we did. I feel that was a little bit more appropriate, but that kind of an angle on it is why I had originally thought that could have been appropriate as a topic. But illness definitely has a much bigger presence, because for the caterpillar, it doesn't appear to be body horror, but it's definitely illness.
Yeah, and I do think there is something about like that one experience that is the only time you'll experience this, and it's bad. It's that like there's those there are those experiences that like kind of really set up a lot of character development and set up, you know, especially in books, they tend to kind of get recalled back to a little bit more. There's only so much in the story that you have. So, you know, it's interesting because from an author's choice perspective, this didn't have to be in the book. And the author chose to have this caterpillar go through that trauma of getting sick. And they're okay, but, you know, that's, if you think about a reader or an audience perspective, you know, the audience for this book is a lot younger than a lot of our books. And they're reading about this caterpillar getting sick, and that's a big plot point.
And I can't help but compare it. So in the tarot cards, the card Death is one that generally it comes up and they get freaked out. But the way I've always interpreted it is death is just a big change. And so any huge change in your life is a symbolic or metaphoric or sometimes literal, hopefully not. It is a type of death. You know, when you finish high school, you die. You know, your high school self dies, and then a new self is reborn into university or a job or the Peace Corps or whatever you want to do. And so that idea that death and change are interchangeable and that neither is bad, but both are really intense and potentially traumatic, even if they lead to something good. Because death can lead to heaven if that's what you believe in, but death is still traumatic.
Yeah. I don't happen to believe that it leads to heaven, but yes, like it just, you know.
Well, and we don't know anything about the caterpillar's belief system.
This is true. We don't. And the caterpillar,
it's a metaphorical,
I want to be clear, the caterpillar is alive at the end of the book.
Oh,
yeah. But it is definitely no longer the caterpillar.
Exactly.
There is no more caterpillar. There is just a butterfly. So in that sense, our character of the caterpillar is gone.
Yeah, the caterpillar dies so the butterfly can be born. The child dies so the adult can be born.
I feel the most sad for the cocoon, though. Didn't get to really do much, and probably, speaking of illness, didn't feel super great while he was a chemical soup of cocoon.
Yeah, that's fair.
On to the wrap-up and ratings. For the gratuity rating for Absent Parents, I have a feeling I know which one this is. They're absent. They're not there.
Well,
this to me feels like backstory.
Yeah, backstory, and also I do want to add one layer to that. They're not there, and the book doesn't really acknowledge that they exist. So they're not really present at all in any way, shape, or form. But it's not a very in-your-face experiential thing for the reader. So absolutely backstory, and I would say mild in backstory.
Okay. But even mild is like us saying, well, the caterpillar arrived somehow.
Right.
Therefore, they must be absent. Yeah. Food insecurity. What do you think, Andrea?
It's kind of complicated. I guess, like, it's not that bad, so maybe kind of a moderate, like, well, because I think a lot of that is our interpretation, you know, intentional fallacy, death of the author. Like, we perceive it that way, but Yeah, so I guess kind of more moderate, like.
So I think, given that food insecurity is a topic that we've talked about on other books, we have a sense of like the scale of what food insecurity can be like.
Yeah.
And I think this is mild, like very mild. Because the caterpillar
That's true.
isn't sure, and then it's better.
That's actually a really good point. Yeah. Like, there is
not
that insecurity, but it's very quickly dealt with. You know, the caterpillar feels sick and immediately feels better. The caterpillar is hungry, immediately gets food.
Actually,
sorry.
Try to stay away
Spoiler
from
warning.
As much as possible. That's okay. Those are very minor for this particular text, but ideally,
sorry about that. I'll keep that in mind from now on. I know this is a really hot media property right now. I'm so sorry if I spoiled anything for people.
Oh, it is. You'd be surprised.
No, that's okay. I mean, to be fair, they've had like 40 years.
That's not that long. Like 40 years is a blink of the eye.
Later too.
Oh, yeah. I guess that's true. Okay, so
speaking of illness,
I think it's mild. Illness.
I think this is actually moderate. This was the major trauma point.
I would say, especially in the I think that's a difference between the film and the book as well. I feel like partially due to the animation style, the sickness feels more visceral in the film compared to the book.
Oh yeah. Oh, and we forgot to say, we did all watch the film, and we'll have a link to that in the show notes. We will have that link. But yeah, we actually forgot to talk about any of our topics because we were so focused on what's like in the original text, which I think is as it should be. But yeah, we did watch the film of this, and I think if we were a movie podcast instead of a book podcast, we would have had some pretty different ratings, because definitely like the illness is one aspect that the film played up a lot more than the book did. But I do agree that even if we're just talking about the book, I think the illness is moderate. Like, it doesn't last very long, but it is a more intense
and again, with that context of caterpillars don't live that long. Caterpillars, butterflies, etc. So that one time of being sick, and also when it's the first time of something happening, it feels worse. You know, your first heartbreak is maybe not the most painful heartbreak of your life once you're old, but when you're 14 and you've been broken up with for the first time, or when you're 21 and you've been broken up with for the first time, whenever the first time happens, it's the worst thing you've ever felt, because it is. And I could see that being the same for this caterpillar, and that kind of ratcheting up the ranking, or the rating, sorry.
Yeah. That makes sense. Why this trauma? Integral, interchangeable, or irrelevant? How do we feel about absent parents?
Given how much
I agree,
I think it is irrelevant.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, they're so absent, they're literally not mentioned. One could argue it's a trauma not present in the book as much as it is heavily implied, so it's absolutely irrelevant.
Agreed.
Yep. Food insecurity.
I think this is integral. I think this is it's the hook. It's the first anything that happens.
Because he has to not have food in order to then have the rest of the plot happen.
Right.
At least briefly.
Yeah, that's kind of his core.
For sure.
The core motivation.
Illness.
And therefore sort of the core, difficulty. Like, this pursuit of food is...
Yeah, it is the plot, so to speak.
That's his hero's journey, Need food, can't get food, find food, food bad. I mean, and though if we're going for the full Campbell thing, he's also missing the mentor, which I should have brought up in the absent parent thing. But
yeah. Well,
I mean, I don't think everything needs the Joseph Campbell treatment, but the movie feels like it has your back, because it definitely felt like it was angling for the sun and moon to be way more involved than
the movie wanted it to be a much more dramatic, intense story compared to the book is a bit more lighthearted.
For sure.
Illness. I think this is irrelevant. I think the author wanted this to be there, but if you pull it out of the plot, the story continues and there's no real actual plot change.
That felt like it was trying to be an afternoon special, like, you should eat green things.
Yeah.
Yep. But it didn't. Yeah, absolutely. That's irrelevant. All right. Was the trauma treated with care? Absent parents?
Yeah.
I
think care as in...
Yeah. I mean, I think no care would have been, by the way, this caterpillar's parents are not around.
Yeah, so exactly. Like,
I mean, it's called absent parents, I feel like. But I take your point. But I think that commenting on it would have kind of, especially for like younger reader, that could be confusing at that point, especially for something that like is irrelevant. So overall, yes, I agree. This is treated with care. Food insecurity. I feel like, to me, this one feels like enough.
Yeah.
It's not really like softened or taking care of it all, but it's so brief. Like, it's not lingering and it's not dragging it out.
Plus, it's not really. It's definitely something that you have to kind of infer from the text too, which I think gives it an added layer of protection for the readers.
My only concern there is the thing about like, oh, well, when he ate a leaf, then he felt better, which is kind of, it could be interpreted as like a moral thing of like, oh, eating junk food is bad, eating healthy food is good. But of course, access to healthy food isn't equal. It's not your fault if you can't buy vegetables.
Right.
True. But I think, too, the fact that this caterpillar doesn't exist in a society where an economy is a thing puts also an added layer of care in that, too. And gives the reader some protection there as well.
Well, but keeping in mind that most likely the reader is going to be human, I still think there is some of this to worry about.
Oh, there is. But as far as like care levels, I still think that leaves it at enough.
Yeah, I'm enough
is my argument.
With caveat.
That's why it's enough instead of yes.
Okay, good.
Enough is literally the caveat.
I guess I sensed
category.
That. I just wasn't. I wanted to be very clear.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, for illness. Okay, in the book, I think this is treated with either a care or enough care. The movie, it's not.
Honestly, the scene with the face turning. Okay.
No spoilers. Don't.
Yes.
The way the movie handles
it's a little intense. Kind of as someone who often has indigestion, it was almost like I almost felt like I had indigestion just watching it.
Oh no.
Yeah, we'll definitely put not enough there.
Yeah, because I don't think the book is taking care. Like, it's not as dramatic as the movie.
No.
But it's definitely not taking care specifically. Mostly lucks into not enough with its brevity. For the point of view for the trauma and aftermath, we kind of have this like, for everything, we have this kind of like omniscient narrator to like telling us what's going on with the caterpillar, but we don't actually get the caterpillar's thoughts.
That's a good
on
point.
Any of this.
Yeah, it's definitely just this third person opinion on everything, and which is odd in a book that really only has 3 characters.
Yeah,
to then have none of
that's
them.
interesting because it would be so easy to even just give the caterpillar dialogue. Like, the caterpillar could say, I ate one apple and I was still hungry. But it's this choice to be narrating.
Yeah, and this book didn't do that. Yeah. It is a little bit, I don't want to call it an odd choice, but it is a very specific
Honestly,
choice.
It makes me think more, it makes it feel more like a fable. Especially with the strong kind of morality suggestion of, you should eat the things that are healthy for you. And that will, is that what it's saying? That you need to feed yourself with what is healthiest for you and that will allow you to become the best version of yourself?
I think that's maybe a little...
Yeah,
well, if we're going as a fable,
then
that might work. But I think as for the text, I think the text as presented, that's a little bit of a reach.
I'm doing the full, English major thing where I can argue anything with one point of evidence.
We need to have you on 1 month on the stream where we just hand you a scenario and tell you to spin it.
I would do that. I would do that for 3 hours. You can just give me different topics and time limits.
It would be great.
I would do that as long as you needed me to. Like you heard me on the live stream.
We'll have to talk about that later. Yeah.
I can do extemporaneous presentations.
All right. So our last, absolutely. All right. So our last couple things in our wrap up. So first we need to come up with a group writer's tip. This can be a do this going forward or don't do this, and generally relating to the book as an example. Does anybody have something?
I was going to say do make a sequel, but my understanding is like multiple people have tried their hands at like writing the sequel to this book because it's actually like pretty popular.
Oh, cool.
I mean, a sequel
for being so short.
That's generally a good advice, I think, especially something like this. There's a lot of different directions it could go in. Like,
this begs for a sequel because like there's a transformation at the end of it. Well, what is the former caterpillar doing now? What are they up to? What's going on? Like, they have an entirely new kind of food involved. Like, there's a lot of room for that.
Yeah, I mean, we could.
Or
is
what
there
if if it's not just do make a sequel, it's do explore different. What am I thinking? Like different perspectives, different narrative possibilities. As in, there's all sorts of directions that this butterfly character could go in now.
I'm also sure that this isn't the only caterpillar in this world, and maybe some of them have slightly different journeys.
Yeah, maybe do explore different perspectives, different narratives.
I want to know the source of some of the things the caterpillar ate.
Right.
There might be a story in there.
I maintain that there was some rather unfortunate technique involved. That's my personal
world build.
theory.
Even if you don't say everything you know in your story, do know the background of your story.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is like, it has a lot of real world grounding, and that's, I think that's definitely a strength because, the text is rather minimal to exactly as much as needed to convey the narrative. But having it so securely in the real world means that even though it doesn't have a lot of world building involved, most likely a reader coming across it should be familiar enough to have some idea of what's going on. Alternatively, it's designed to let readers who don't yet know about what happens to caterpillars gain some knowledge about what happens to them, and it like really gets that focus on it. I like that. Or I'll say another really aspiring writer tip. I just had a thought.
Okay, well let's just go into that then.
Okay. My not aspiring writer tip. Favorite non-traumatic thing about the book. That's what it is.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, that's what I meant. Because I think our aspiring writer tip is more stuff in this universe, please. Luckily, that universe is our universe.
Oh,
I
before we, sorry, I just remembered one thing I wanted to bring up before we move on to the next topic. Is another like related to the do good world building is I guess, do world building where, again, like this, it's not locked to one culture. Like, caterpillars and butterflies exist all over the world. So whatever, even if this had to be translated into another language, like, there are caterpillars in Korea, there are caterpillars in Timbuktu. Like, this is a concept that just about anyone could understand if they're on a planet that has caterpillars.
Yeah, I feel like the Antarctica adaptation would be a tough sell, but other than that,
but that's pretty good.
Like, that's generally all right.
6 out of 7 continents. Yeah. That's not bad.
Yeah. So my favorite non-traumatic thing about the book. Oh no, it dropped out of my head. I like the way the world building. I like the way the story stays really focused, so that it's like, it's very grounding. It has some objects that ought to be familiar to the demographic for this readership. Like the foods especially. Again, this is assuming a Western audience. The book was originally written in English. Like you said, translations that maybe had like culturally specific foods could be really, really cool. But given that it assumes you're probably speaking English reading this, or at least in a context where you're likely to know the foods that are in this book, it means that you have like these very like familiar objects, and then you have this transformation that's involved. I feel like anyone listening to our podcast should probably be old enough to know that caterpillars go into a cocoon, or they go into a chrysalis. When it's a cocoon, that's actually just silk around the chrysalis inside. It's a little bit complicated. Anyway, all cocoons have chrysalises inside them, is what I mean when there's caterpillars involved. And then it turns into a butterfly, and like that is technically a spoiler, but like that's just,
oh my god, I can't believe you spoiled butterflies for me.
I'm sorry if that spoils the.
I'm never listening to this podcast again. I'm quitting. I'm leaving. That, like, turning off the recording, going back to my my room. I can't do this anymore.
But one of the things I like about it is that it has all these familiar objects, and then it introduces this concept that is likely to be new to the demographic involved, which is very young children. And so you have like these things that are really exciting, but that I'm also worried that it could prompt a lot of questions of like, oh no, if I eat too much cake, am I going to turn into a butterfly? You could have these very interesting conversations with children off of this, and just
honestly, mine is similar. I was thinking I really like
Andrea,
how it focuses the story only on this worry about eating and feeling sick and then transforming, because based on my own outside knowledge, I know that it's really dangerous to be a caterpillar. There's birds, there's other bugs, there's all sorts of predators. But that's not addressed in this story because it's not part of the story. Like, that's not a threat that matters. And so it's not even addressed. So it creates this safe space to explore that story of transformation and self-sufficiency.
I think mine is, I really like the artwork in this book. I realize that's, it's not just the cover. This book has supporting artwork for the story on I think every page, and it's really cool. I really like the way it almost looks like tissue paper cut watercolor, and it's, I don't know, I realize that that's not necessarily a story thing, but I really like the way it supports the text, and I really like how easy and clean it is to read and to see and understand what is going on. And it's very vivid imagery.
Oh, yeah.
in
When
my
you
head.
invited me to be on this episode and you mentioned the book we were reading, because I read this when I was young, which was admittedly a very long time ago. But, well, I guess I wasn't that young. Anyway, I remembered reading this and the book really stuck in my head, like, because of the colors and the very specific art style. And I thought the animated or movie version represented that really nicely with the kind of shifting, I don't know how to describe it exactly, but the kind of, it was gorgeous.
Yeah, the animation was very cool in the movie. I encourage anyone who hasn't seen the movie to check it out.
Yeah. And again, we'll have that link in the show notes so you can. Yeah, I actually did not, I don't think I read this one as a kid. I don't think I encountered the idea of this book until like middle school or possibly high school.
Yeah, I think I knew about this book when I was babysitting children.
Yeah, this was definitely this was not a book in our household.
Yeah, I definitely remember.
No. we had a rather limited set of kids series.
I don't think I owned this ever, but like I knew about it pretty early on. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty early on when it was published. Like, yeah.
I mean, it was published in a time that I would be able to read it, right? Yeah, it was 19.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. I know years.
Yeah.
I'm great at years.
All right. I think that does it for the Very Hungry Caterpillar. Andrea, please let our audience know where they can find you.
As you can tell, I'm definitely a human and not a vampire or any other sort of supernatural creature. If you would like to find me, you can either just walk into the woods and start yelling and I'll probably appear. But if that's not for you, you can find me on Twitter at mythtaken_ID. That's myth as in Joseph Campbell, taken as in Liam Neeson _ID. And that'll connect you to all the other podcasts and things that I do. I'm part of the Sinister Parent Company network. We do Good Idea. That's a improv sort of show. Anyway, you can check that out at goodidea.show, and that will connect you to all the other podcasts I'm on. I like to say I'm guest of many, host of none when it comes to podcasts, which isn't quite true anymore because I'm more co-host of many, guest of many. I will be on every podcast eventually. Just give me enough time. But yeah, please do follow me on Twitter. Come fight with me on Twitter. Bully me. Be friends with me. Whatever you want to do on Twitter with me is fine. I'm here for it. Come hang out.
Excellent. And we'll have those links in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us. And this one had a little bit of an odd upload date, so we will catch you in slightly less than a fortnight, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right, stop the recording. Okay.
All music used in this podcast was created by Nicole as Heartbeat Art Co. and is used with permission.
You can follow us on Twitter at Books That Burn, all one word.
You can email us with questions, comments, or book recommendations at booksthatburn@yahoo.com.
Support us on patreon.com/booksthatburn. All patrons get access to our upcoming book list and receive a one-time shout-out.
You can leave us an iTunes review. This helps people to find the show.
And find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks.